The Elder Gods Want In by A.J. King. Copyright 2022. Prelude. "Tell me what happened, officer," said a balding man wearing casual attire along with a badge dangling from his neck, revealing his identity as one Detective Jake Mann. "Sir, it was like a butcher shop here. Blood, chains, bottles full of God knows what." The officer was young. He shook his head with his eyes closed, refusing to look back at the scene. His hands rattled nervously. Detective Mann snapped his fingers. The officer held his left hand with his right to stabilize it. "Sir," he continued with his eyes open, staring at Detective Mann. "Me and my partner came here on a call reporting a local disturbance. We thought it was just some kids doing some kind of early Halloween thing. This building is condemned, so we could at least cite them for trespassing." The officer mumbled, losing his words, not knowing how to continue. Detective Mann sighed impatiently and walked into the building, passing newly positioned officer tape. The air was filled with a stench too akin to fecal matter and copper or iron. He made no visible show of his disgust. A floodlight was turned on as he walked in. The police were still setting up the scene for forensics. Blood was spilled in splotches around the floor in both dry areas and fresh puddles. There were several rusty tables holding various cutting tools, powered and non-powered alike. On the ceiling dangled several body parts in all varieties, including innards and genitals. Those extremities hanging were also both old and new. A quick glance gave away that whoever has used this place has been doing these heinous crimes for months or even a year. Chained to a wall were 3 dead people whose identities and even genders were impossible to tell due to their condition. These 3 had patches of skin removed, limbs severed, mouths surgically cut up to be entirely unrecognizable. The air was sickly, filled with dust and fetid decay. Against another wall was a dead man, nondescript, with bullet holes across his chest and half his head blown off. In his dead hand he clutched a bloody cleaver. Another officer was currently drawing a chalk line around the dead man. At this sight, Detective Mann winced. I expected some kind of kids doing stupid pagan nonsense, and something went wrong. Not this. Jake walked over to the dead man with the cleaver. The officer was finishing up the chalk line. As he stood up, Jake addressed him. "Am I right to assume that this is our man?" "Probably." The officer shrugged and walked away. Another detective approached. "Jake, glad you're here." "I'm not." "Cal?" "Yeah, me neither. Well, be dealing with the paperwork alone for this for months, maybe even years." Jake walked over to the chained victims. "Looks like these people were held captive for months. Look how long their nails and hair are." Cal bent down to the first person chained. He pointed at their mouth with his pen. "Precision work. The details on their mouths and cheeks were done by no amateur. The guy put real work in making these people suffer. He cut them in just the right way to incur maximum pain." Jake looked up, peering at the grotesque decor dangling above them. "This guy's seen too many Hellraiser movies." Without looking up, he continued to examine the 3 dead victims. Cal took out a notebook and began jotting several things. "What could possibly set this wacko off? Do you think he was fed up with whatever mental asylum he was living in?" An officer handed Detective Mann the wallet of the suspect. Jake opened it, and his eyes widened with disbelief at the ID. "Holy shit, you won't believe this, Cal. What is it? Who was he?" Jake took out the ID and presented it to the other detective. Judge Browning. Both men jerked their heads in the half-headed, slumped body of Judge Browning, still clutching with his dead-tight grip on the cleaver, then quickly back at the ID to confirm their disbelief. There was no doubt in their minds. "This is insane!" Cal raised his voice, more than he intended. "I voted for him, for Christ's sake. I don't know what to say." "Sirs, we have eyewitnesses," another officer said. "What do you mean, eyewitnesses? Take me to them." As the three walked, the officers talked. They entered another room. "These two children were kept locked in a room. They appear unharmed, at least physically anyways." Sitting on chairs, eating sandwiches provided by the police, were two twins whose features were too similar in facial height, hair, color, skin tone, eyes, and everything else to not recognize them as siblings, possibly even twins. They stared blankly at the walls before them, even looking through the approaching detectives as if they did not see them. Their traumatized expression gave away what they knew, which must be far more than any child should know. Detective Mann knelt down next to one on the left, a boy. The one on the right was a girl. "I'm sorry. You had to be there." The child gave no gesture to Jake, only continued to stare out while slowly taking bites from their food. Jake looked back to Cal with a worried expression. Cal returned the same. "Let's get you kids out of here." As Jake stood up, he saw something from the corner of his eye. A white figure moved from shadow to shadow. Jake assumed it to be just another person on the scene tending to things. He ignored it. The lights flickered in a power shortage sort of way, a natural yet unnerving sort of way. Through that brief flicker, only the two twins were able to see. They witnessed, in that tiny space of time, dozens of men and women that were only seen in that moment fighting. Heads were bashing into the walls, blood was spilled and splattered, while knives gut into some, bullets were fired into others. Above the fight scene were two winged figures looming over everyone and everything, yet still visible within this room. One figure was pure white, not pink, Caucasian, or even albino, but solid white. Their wings were feathery white, and there was a light about them that was subtle, radiating what could only be described as joy incarnate. The other winged figure was quite the opposite. Solid black, leathery wings, glowing red eyes. They radiated a glaring animosity about themselves. The angelic creature plucked one of its own feathers, dropping it, while the demonic creature stabs into its scaly flesh, allowing a droplet of blood to fall. The scene ended before those two discarded things could decay visibly. However, the feather landed on the girl's lap, while the drop of blood landed on the boy's head, seeping into his scalp painfully like acid. The boy winced, but made no audible sound. The detectives did not see or notice. The girl took hold of the feather, and it melted into her skin, soothing her, giving a feeling of serenity.